everyone, and welcome to another weekly live stream of the Platformers. And today we have a very special Ask Me Anything session with a man who needs no introductions. But for those of you who may not know the name, Viktor Farcic is here with us. Yeah, that's you. I'm talking about you, Viktor.
Me.
Yes. So would you like to introduce yourself for people who don't know you? And for those who do, tell us a bit about what you're doing recently and what are you working on?
Yeah, I always have difficulty to describe what to do. I honestly don't know. But I know that my paycheck comes from Upbound. I work in Upbound. It's a company behind Crossplane. Crossplane is probably the project where I'm focused the most. And everything beyond that is kind of random. And right now, the second question, kind of what I do lately, I'm seriously trying to avoid writing any line of code manually myself anymore.
And how's that working for you?
It's working great. It changed a lot. Like maybe half a year ago, this is such a waste of time. Kind of for every minute I spend with it, I need 3 minutes to undo what it does. But now the situation changed. I think that the agents are getting better, models are getting better, MCPs are getting better. And on top of that, I think that we are slowly learning how to do it because it's not really, any tool you get and you think kind of, hey, the first moment I use it, I'm proficient, and it's not really. It takes a bit of time.
So do you mind sharing what are you using for your work?
Weather or what?
What are you using? What works for you? Which model?
Okay.
Which MCP?
So the agent of the model of choice is Sonnet. That's not surprise, probably. Most of us are using Sonnet. And I'm completely off any IDE. Cloud Code is my choice. I stopped using Cursor or anything like that. And I also stopped using MCPs because I think that most of them are silly and not very useful. I think that it's a very useful protocol, and we are yet to discover what to use it for. So
we're less than 3 minutes in, and you already gave your hot take and unpopular opinion on MCP.
Throw the stones.
2 months ago or 3 months ago, MCP was like the buzzword, the thing that everyone was talking about.
No,
right?
It is still very important, and I strongly believe in MCP as a protocol. The problem is that, and I'm now talking from the perspective of software engineering, just to be clear. I'm not talking about you using ChatGPT in a browser. I'm not talking about Anthropic desktop application. I'm talking about you using coding agents, right? Cursor, VS Code with Copilot, Cloud Code, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't need MCP that will do equally good or worse code than CLIs or my terminal. Right. I don't need MCP for Git. I don't need MCP for GitHub. I don't need MCP for most of the things that agents already know how to do. They're pretty good, actually, at running in terminals and executing stuff. Even if you use Cursor, right, it's still interacting with the terminal and shell and what's not, right? So I'm looking more for very special MCPs that are doing something more than to be the one-to-one reflection of an API, right? Because Git MCP is basically doing the same thing as Git. Now, an interesting one, the one I like the most would be Taskmaster. That helps me organize a feature or PRD into separate tasks to track the progress and so on and so forth. That would be an MCP that is not just doing the same thing as CLIs or APIs are doing, but very, very different and at the same time very useful.
All right. And what about more stuff within our realm of DevOps and platform engineering? Like obviously we see that for writing code, the models are getting really good and useful, but what about infrastructure?
I don't think much is happening right now. I'm not even sure that I know of a single use case that I say, hey, this is amazing, right? For one reason or another, usually those innovations or changes, or those waves, tend to start with a specific group of people, specific role. Like Kubernetes was mostly and still is limited to operations. Developers don't care about it, right? And AWS also was to specific roles. And I think that AI right now is happening mostly to pure application developers. Right? I don't see it being widely adopted with operations. And maybe in read-only mode, when kind of digest the data and do something, but not much more beyond that. And more importantly, I don't see companies behind the tooling of that sort seriously knowing what they're doing with AI. Last year, I don't know if you noticed, if you go to KubeCon, at least that's my impression, like a year ago, 2 years ago, let's say, it was everybody AI.
Right.
And then you kind of, what are you doing? And then my translation of what I'm told that they're doing is, so you're sending CURL requests to ChatGPT. Is that what you're doing? Kind of like, let's be honest. Right? Kind of, that's how you literally hacked it over the weekend, put a wrapper around HTTP calls to ChatGPT, and you get something back and say, AI, I'm done. Right? And then in the last two maybe KubeCons, the number of the amount of AI among exhibitors dropped. And I have a theory that that's because they realize, okay, so actually it's a bit more than CURL request to ChatGPT. Kind of, we need to figure this out, right? And we don't know how to do it, and we don't have that expertise. It takes time. And now I think that after that dip, it will come back probably, maybe even in Atlanta or next year. But right now, we don't have many solutions. I'm saying zero, but not many.
I agree, and I'm also guilty of this as well. I remember a year or two ago when I was working at Condor and we were developing our AI agent. I mean, back then it wasn't an AI agent, and you literally saw that all of the competition, researching it, and there was a lot of pressure from marketing to, put it out there that we are AI powered, that we're an AI company. But then when the product team was researching the competition, we found out exactly what you were saying, that this is the level right now, and there's no value in it right now. Only marketerial value, maybe not like real value. But I gotta ask you, do you think is it because we just haven't found a product that's good enough, or is it just because infrastructure is something that we will forever not trust machines to take over?
So, there are quite a few questions there. To begin with, I think that until this year, we didn't have agents, really. Everything you could do with AI was, I get the data, I send it to model, and model tells me something, and I repeat that something to the user, right? Now we have agents that can interact with models and do stuff and be a bit more intelligent, right? And models themselves are also better and what's not, right? So I think that now it's almost becoming too easy, right? Now you can actually create a relatively powerful agent that does really funky stuff over a week, right? Not necessarily coding from scratch, but you use Cloud Code SDK. You write a couple of prompts, really good ones. Spend a few hours on prompts. They're not as easy as it looks like. Create some flow, what happens when, and stuff like that. In a week, you can have something really, really powerful. If you go back a year ago, right, what could you have? You had only a model. You could have powerful CURL, kind of like, it's not there yet. Now we have, I think the technology is there, or conceptual ideas are there, and now it's easy, right? Easy to build something relatively useful, not necessarily groundbreaking, but relatively useful. Now I already forgot. Yeah, I know that you had like 3 questions in one. I answered one, and then I don't know what else you asked.
It's okay. We'll keep the rapid AMA session to keep up at your pace. We have a question from Guy. Guy's asking, where do you think the AI ecosystem on Kubernetes is going? We talked about it briefly before we went live.
So there is a big potential in combining Kubernetes and AI. I don't know exactly what that will be yet. That's to be discovered, but a lot of potential, because essentially we still have 2 types of operations, let's say, right? we have repeatable the same over and over again. Think of it like CI pipelines, right? I don't need any intelligence. I don't need AI. I don't need to spend tokens on that, right? Kind of, because it's always the same. And then we have some operations that normally were done by people that require certain discussion, certain intellect, no matter how low or high it is. Now, Kubernetes is actually very good at those repeatable actions. So let's say that I would like to build now a system that would monitor the status of my cluster and report back, call me on a phone, right? When there is something truly wrong with it, right? I would probably use AI for that. But then what Kubernetes gives me is events. So what can I do with AI? I can run it literally every 5 seconds, kind of like, what's happening in my cluster? Query all the APIs in Kubernetes, and then gather all the data, and then digest and try to deduce whether there is something worthwhile knowing, and if there is, send a message to Viktor, right? And then repeat that all the time, continuously, right? And that's a pretty big waste of AI, tokens, of everything, right? Or you can say, I'm now just brainstorming. I haven't thought about this, right? But thinking aloud. Or you can leverage Kubernetes events and say, okay, so, when you create something, I don't care. Kind of like when something is working, I don't care. But when there is an error, when that error is repeated, let's say 3 times, an error event that is repeated 3 times, then trigger me, right? And then I'm going to check what's going on and report back if there is anything to report back, or say, no, this is okay. Kind of like, we already have this issue. It's Jenkins. Kind of ignore if it's error, right? So combining that reliability and repeatability of Kubernetes, and I'm using events just like one example, with some kind of intelligence, has a lot of potential. I just don't know where it's going.
Yeah, and also it could learn, and then next time that it recognizes this pattern, it says, oh no, Viktor said that this is Jenkins bullshit, no need to trigger him for this. Exactly.
I mean, learning is still kind of complicated with AI in general. But yeah, in theory at least, it should be learning the patterns and what you like, what you don't like, what should be ignored, become better over time. I'm not saying that we can build all that and many other things that are in my head today, but we are getting there, and it's definitely going to be big. I just think that in general, AI in operations is probably going to be few years behind development, right? Because people are more risk averse, right? Kind of, I don't care about your JavaScript code, but my Kubernetes cluster needs to be special type of stuff. I cannot let just anybody or anything mess with it, right? There is certain level of people tend to worry more about what's happening in operations than in development.
Yeah, well, there is won't you agree that there's a higher risk if like there's an error in the code versus something fundamentally wrong with the infrastructure?
I mean, I'm not sure that you think that my application is not likely to behave correctly if my code is messed up than operations. I mean, I can just as easily mess up with on application level as on operational level, right? Maybe not as wide, so maybe not everything, but actually even everything, right? I'm not sure what is worse. I'm not sure how much that can be measured. What I do know is that I've seen people mess up all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I definitely don't think that AI and agents and what's not is there yet. But I'm also not very fond of, hey, AI is non-deterministic. We cannot let it do that. And then usually I answer, what else is non-deterministic? You. You are non-deterministic. You cannot do the same thing twice. You cannot even tie your shoelaces in exactly the same way twice. Right? Kind of like, you are non-deterministic as well. And that's okay, right? We'll see.
It's a feature, not a bug, you were saying.
Say again?
You were saying it's a feature, not a bug.
I mean, you cannot be, you don't want to be deterministic when you're trying to analyze something, right? Doesn't matter whether it's human or a machine. The point is precisely to be non-deterministic. Hey, find me best solution for this problem. If it's deterministic, it would be, oh yeah, the same solution we implemented in 1975 on mainframe. It's still the same, right? So repeatable things should be deterministic, and non-repeatable shouldn't.
And in your wildest dreams, what would be the future of platform engineering and AI? Like where you don't have to do anything and everything is done for you, or what do you envision?
I don't think that there will be. I don't think we're getting anytime soon to. There is nothing for me to do, but what I do think is that we will slowly start to realize that one of the most valuable skills is the ability to really explain what you need. And I know that this sounds silly, but actually, if you think about all the managers you worked with, right? There were managers who were actually really good at explaining to the team, kind of like, this is what we want, this is the vision, this is how we're going to get there, and so on and so forth, right? And they were kind of like, oh, can you build I want a shopping cart. And for people to shop. And give us money. That's my feature, right? Those who are able, that was always the truth, right? Those who were able to envision what they want and how to get there and explain to others, those were signs of really good teams and good companies. And just as much that was important when product people were explaining to developers, I think that now that is important now when we're explaining to AI, right? So engineers who are better at articulating what they need are going to see much better results. And just to be clear, there is a world of difference between how you explain, what you type in a prompt. World of difference. We can try the same thing and I can get 5 times better result than you, or 5 times worse, just because I wrote it differently.
Do you have any examples from recent memory?
I mean, most of it, I spent tremendous amount of time actually refining my prompts. So they all start horrible, right? And then I tend to spend, and probably people think that I'm a lunatic, I probably spend a full week on a reusable prompt, or a few days, just single prompt. And when it's something that is not reusable, like for example, I would spend maybe half a day writing a PRD, just what my feature will be. Half a day. And then I do it in 2 hours. The whole implementation. That's very strange initially when you realize that actually you're spending much more time explaining what you want than doing, because traditionally it's the other way around. Kind of, okay, now I need a month to do what you told me in 2 hours, right?
Right. So it's like optimization thingy, right? If you're investing half a day on a PLD, then to cut your actual working time by half, or 5 times, or 10 times.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, you get better results. It's not optimization. The end result always ends up being the same. But how many times I need to redo it and restart and try over and again and again and again, that really, the number of those things depends a lot on how well you define it from the very start.
I agree.
It's kind of funny, sorry for interrupting. It's almost that we are going back to circle. Like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, everybody was waterfall. First, we would spend tremendous amount of time figuring out what we want, and then we would spend 1 year developing that something, and then maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. We don't know, right? And then we moved to Agile, kind of like, hey, every week, what's a not? small sprints, and design is going to emerge eventually. And I feel that we're going back towards initial. It's just that maybe not developing for a year, but for 2 hours, but still spending much more time than before thinking about what we want.
That's an interesting take. Maybe while going into some hybrid mode where you're doing waterfall, but in shorter sprints.
I mean, it's still short, kind of. I rarely spend more than, I think that the maximum time I spent working on a single thing would be a week now, something that could take me easily a month. So it's definitely faster, right? But still, logically speaking, it's closer to waterfall, yeah.
Mm-hmm. We have a question waiting from Edgar.
Edgar, hey.
I think maybe we've already answered this in so many words, but do you think we will see any replacement for Kubernetes in coming years?
So Kubernetes will be replaced one day. Let's start with that. Kind of simply everything gets replaced one day, except mainframe.
And you.
Oh, I will retire long before that happens. So Kubernetes will be replaced. Now, what I'm not sure is it will not be replaced anytime soon. That's for sure. And the reason is very simple. Simply, probably if you exclude AI, Kubernetes could be one of the things where the industry spent most money on, right? Tremendous amount of money was invested and is still being invested in Kubernetes. And that investment does not go away easily. Even if we all decide that Kubernetes is garbage today, it's still here to stay for a very, very long time, right? So next 5 years it will be here for sure. Now, what the part I'm not sure is whether Kubernetes will stay what it is today or it will transform itself into something very different. That's the part I do not yet know. I hope it's the latter because that would be awesome.
Different how?
I don't know yet. I don't know yet. The only thing I know is that whenever there is a crushingly big wave coming, and we had a big wave with cloud, we had a big wave with Kubernetes, and now we have big wave with AI and quite a few others. That will somehow affect Kubernetes, right? And I don't yet know how. I honestly don't, but I'm sure that status quo never worked in the past, right? Kind of, Kubernetes and what WebSphere? Well, problem solved. We just run WebSphere in Kubernetes, right? If any of you listening did that and is still doing that, my apologies. You know the pain.
Thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. Somehow it will need to change. I don't know how yet. I suspect that we will see less well-structured APIs, more APIs coming that are more open. And another thing that I feel that will be very much needed, that's a more dynamic way to create APIs and controllers. Right? Instead of us thinking in very static terms, okay, this is the CRD, this is the spec, and that spec can accept requests, and then a controller does exactly this and nothing else. Something more dynamic, because AI by nature, agents are very dynamic, right? And they will probably be coming up with solutions on the fly, and they will need to communicate those solutions somehow API, and that communication will have to be somehow more dynamic.
Yeah, and I was a shadow in the latest Kubernetes release, and there was indeed a lot of focus in those areas of dynamic resource allocations and more use cases for AI and GPUs. And so I think you're right on the money with that. And let's not forget that the entire CNCF was built around Kubernetes. So there's a whole ecosystem that's built to support Kubernetes and cloud computing in general. So
yes, that's absolutely true. But there is a shift also happening now, is that projects are not going necessarily into foundations anymore, right? We had a period, and that's with CNCF, that hey, if you want to stand any chance of being adopted, you need to go to a foundation. And now I feel that it's somehow reversing. It's kind of nobody wants to go into foundation. Kind of like there is no Tropic in foundation. There is no, except maybe things from China. But even they are open source, but not in foundations. So we're still trying to figure out why is that so. But the trend is definitely changing.
And what changed for you? I gotta ask, maybe a year ago, you were still a skeptic when it comes to IDPs, platform engineering. What made you become a believer or at least
Wait, was a
open
skeptic about IDPs?
Or platform engineering in general?
No.
Or
I
a
think I
specific tool?
joined Crossplane because I was very much into platform engineering. Now, I was very skeptical. Okay, maybe this is the thing. I was very skeptical and negative towards Backstage. Yes. I think it was crap.
What changed?
And I still think it's not good. I still didn't think it's not good. But it made me realize that to look at Backstage, not from what it is, but how it was born and where it's going. And then to take somehow a parallel with Kubernetes, because if you look at the Kubernetes during the first couple of years, it was also bad. It was really, really terrible. Kind of, you would need, if you're lucky, you need a week just to install it with kubeadm. And that's if you're very good at your job, right? It was really horrible. And there are many reasons why it succeeded, but probably one of the biggest reasons is extensibility and everybody joining and doing stuff on top of it. And I see the same thing Backstage, right? Doesn't matter whether it's great or no, but everybody's adopting it, everybody's making it better. And then that's almost like, and this will sound in the negative things, but I'm actually talking about it in a very positive way. It's similar to Kubernetes in terms that it is like a black hole, right? That attracts everything around it, right? And grows by doing that. And then just as I don't think that anybody can compete with Kubernetes by doing something very similar, I don't think that anybody can or anything can compete with Backstage. Backstage is and I will choose my words carefully, it is a portal of choice. And I strongly recommend it as a portal. It is not a platform. Platforms are more than a UI, but it is a portal of choice, yes. I like it now. I have that relationship. Usually, in the past, I would start liking somebody and then I start disliking it. Usually, kind of, you could break up with somebody over time, right? This was the opposite, kind of like we started on the wrong foot and now we like each other.
Well, yeah, I feel like the industry, it was the same way, also with Kubernetes and also with Backstage. Like you know it's getting traction when big enterprises are starting to adopt it and they trust the product enough to run it in production. So I feel like back in the days, the Kubernetes was like a big no-no for like serious enterprises, and same with Backstage now, and people like bigger enterprises are adopting it more and more and finding it useful.
Oh yeah.
But maybe this is a good question to touch on for those who are wondering about the difference between a portal and a platform. How do you define them, and why isn't Backstage a platform? What is a platform?
So let's try to figure out what are the major components of a platform like AWS, right? There are some processes, some running in their servers, figuring out what to do, how to create EC2 instance for you, and I don't know, RDS and what's not. There is an API that is serving your requests, right? And that can be through Terraform, it could be through CURL, it could be through AWS CLI, it could be through AWS Console, right? And there is a user interface, and that's AWS Console or Terraform or something like that, right? Those are the three major components of any system, including a platform. First of all, backend with the API, and then user interface on top of that API. Backstage is that user interface. That's what it is. You can make it be other things. It's just that I don't think it's a good idea for you to have business logic and what's not in a front end. Kind of like that's why we have APIs. Your web application should talk to the API. API talks to the backend. Backend does something. It's a very simple architecture, and I don't see it applies to all the big cloud providers that are generic or public platforms. I don't see why it wouldn't apply to you.
Agreed. Let's see what else we have. Is there anything you want to talk about? Because we're approaching our end of time.
I have no idea. I don't know.
All right. Here's a nice, easy question.
Oh,
How-
when somebody says with nice, it's never nice.
How do you define the boundaries between platform engineering and traditional DevOps or SRE practices?
Oh, okay. SRE practice, I understand what it is. It can be described as what would happen if we give developers the task to solve operational problems. You can think of it that way. DevOps, I don't know what DevOps is in terms of a role. I always understood that DevOps is a way how to bridge the gap between development and operations. It's not a role. It would be the same thing as saying, have you heard, do you have any friend who has a role agile engineer?
No.
Exactly. Because we never reached that level of craziness with agile. But we did with DevOps. DevOps engineer, I think that exists. Now, if the goal is really to enable developers to do operations without forcing them to spend years doing it, if we define that like that, then actually building a platform is what accomplishes the ultimate goal of DevOps, right? And so platform engineering, I think it's great, but I also see it in a very different light than most other people.
How
I
so?
don't think that so if we consider the platform is a collection of services, and tell me if you disagree. I like fighting with people, so if you disagree, that would be awesome, right?
I'm a man of peace. I already fought enough.
Okay. If a platform is a collection of services, like, hey, a backend application, how to create and manage a database or backend application or this or that, like, it's a collection of services, probably, right? Now, if a platform engineer is going to create all those services, I don't see how that is possible in a bigger organization. Because if you're going to do that alone, that means that you know everything there is to know about storage, about networking, about databases, about this and that. You're basically 10 different people in one. Now, if you are that person, and you're equally experienced in all those things. Now, if you do exist and you're listening to that, please come to Abound. We're hiring. You're going to get any amount of money, kind of like, if you exist. What is more likely and more likely to succeed is to say, okay, so we have actually people who are very experienced in certain things. Like there is that girl over there, she is very experienced managing databases. She's DBA, right? There is that person over there networking. There is that person is very experienced with security. This person with Kubernetes, right? They should create their own services, how to expose their experience and to others as a service. Now, and that means that they should be creating services to that platform. And that means that the role of a platform engineer should be to provide a mechanism how all those different people, different experts can plug their experience as services into coherent platform, right? So it's more like a glue that ties all those people together than anything else, more than building it yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good statement to end on, since I think it really encapsulates what platform engineering is and how DevOps evolved into being it, or maybe it probably was the intention all along, right? And then this is just the latest implementation
Yeah,
or iteration.
and I'm all for, just to be clear, I'm very positive towards people being ops and then changing their role the next year to be SRE, and then next year changing their role to be DevOps, and now changing their role to platform engineer, because usually if you change the role, you get a raise in your salary, even though you're doing the same thing.
Yep.
And that's awesome. That's absolutely awesome, because, SRE pays more than ops, and DevOps pays more than SRE, and then now platform engineer pays more than SRE. You're doing the same thing. You get more money. Go for it. It's amazing. Do it.
Yeah. Get your
Now
paper.
now you're if you're still into platform slide, somebody will come up with platform AI engineer or something like that.
Yeah.
You'll get another raise soon.
Absolutely. Anything else, Victor, before we wrap this up? Anything you want to touch on? Platform as a product, build versus buy, anything you want to leave our audience with?
I'm very much into. I don't see the point in buying. I think you should be building always. When I say build, I don't mean literally for kind of I open your VS Code and start creating new project from scratch. I mean, when I say build, I mean combine different projects like Backstack, for example, right? Or whatever you choose. Build makes so much more sense than buy for a simple reason, because when you buy something, that something is already predefined in a way, right? Kind of, this is the way to do it. And the point of internal developer platforms is to make your processes, to translate your specific processes into internal platform. And if externally defined processes work for you, then you still don't need, there is no point buying, because then use existing services that are even better than a platform. That just use Google Cloud Run. Use Heroku, right? If you don't have a specific opinion that needs to be implemented, then use existing services. That's great. I wish I was you, right? But if you need something that is tailor-made for you, then you cannot buy it. You need to build it somehow. Even if you buy it, you will still need to build it on top of it.
True. What else? I think we touched on a lot of topics. It's always a pleasure having you on. And
Likewise.
great to see you. Hopefully, I'll see you soon at KCD Sofia. If anyone is in the area, come see Victor. You also have a speaking session there, or just visiting?
Yeah, I visit for free by speaking. Yes. Yeah, I'm speaking there. There's the last possible moment, because it's September. Starting October, Sofia is just horribly cold, miserable. So thank you for not doing it later.
Yeah, thank you, KCD Sofia, and thank you, Victor. If you want to see more of Victor, follow him on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, DevOps Toolkit on YouTube. What else? And on the platformers as well.
There you go.
And so until next time, thank you, Victor. Thank you, platformers at home, for watching and listening. And see you next time.
See you, folks.
Bye-bye.